And I'll continue from where I left off before to say that this bill is nothing but a gambling bill, whereby $10 billion will be borrowed and the taxpayer will incur the risk. And the Labor Party then hope to invest that money and generate a higher return on the money they invest rather than the rate of interest they borrow against. So let's just assume that everything goes perfectly well and assume that the Labor government can borrow money at 4% and they may earn a rate of return on this $10 billion of 6%. So they have a 2% margin. So 2% over $10 billion will be $200 million. Now, if you assume that every house built costs $250,000, that's about 800 houses for $200 million. So Labor claim that they're going to house 6,000 people as a result of this bill. I think the only people that are really going to be making money out of this are the fund managers, who get to actually clip the ticket on the $10 billion that they get to gamble. And of course, these are the same fund managers that get to gamble with the trillions of dollars taken from the workers' pockets of the workers. And of course, they clip the ticket on that. We know that they generate $30 billion a year. According to the Productivity Commission, the cost of superannuation is $30 billion a year. So this will also run into millions, if not tens of millions of dollars in fees for the people, I think it's the Future Fund, that are going to manage it. So, as usual, just like The Voice and just like Native Title, there will be fund managers and lawyers and everything clipping the ticket on this, making a great deal of money at the expense of the taxpayer. Now, anyway, let's just assume, let's just put aside the entire risk proposition here for a minute and just assume that, yes, they do manage to generate a small rate of return and they do manage to build houses for 6,000 people. How is it, where are they actually going to find the builders to actually build these 6,000 houses? Because if you didn't know already, we have got a labour shortage in this country. We already have a labour crisis. And thanks to the genius of the RBA, when they rose interest rates, they haven't just crushed demand, they've also crushed supply, because there isn't a day that goes by today where we don't read about another building company that's gone under, because effectively building companies can't issue fixed-price contracts because the cost of everything is going up rapidly, and because they can't issue fixed-price contracts to the first home buyers or whoever it is that wants to get a house built. The bank won't lend to them because they always need a fixed-price contract. So thanks to the geniuses at the RBA, because they're not only destroying demand, they're destroying supply. And I've long called for a productive quantitative easing program in this country, just like Sir Lachlan Macquarie did over 200 years ago, that built the Sydney hospitals, built the Sydney barracks. That is the way to productivity, is to build things. Now, getting back to this problem has been caused by Labor's reckless immigration program that has seen 400,000 people come in this year. It's then going to decrease to 315,000 next year, but actually total about 1.5 million over the next 5 years. Now, to think that by building 6,000 houses is somehow going to accommodate 400,000 people is just dreaming. It is just dreaming. I mean, what are they planning on doing? Buying a bunch of dongas and putting them in dongas? Because I honestly have no idea how they expect this fund to be able to fund enough social housing for the number of new migrants coming into this country, as well, of course, as the natural rate of birth, natural increase, which I'm off the top of my head, I think it's 150,000 a year as well. So, and we've already got problems in this country. I actually hear from people who actually have jobs that can't actually find a place to rent. I mean, this isn't a case of people are homeless because they don't have the money to pay rent. I mean, there's that issue. That does exist, and that's a problem as well. But we actually have people who have incomes who are sleeping in tents. So I ask you why, and so all Labor is doing here is putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem, and it's a deflection from the much bigger problem, which is their reckless immigration policy that we cannot actually accommodate. Australia cannot accommodate at the moment because we just don't have an economy that is geared towards building. What we have is an economy towards consuming. Now, this is accentuated because 49% of migrants are actually foreign students. Now, the problem I have with this is that the people who pocket the foreign student fees, a la the universities, don't actually have to pay any income tax. Now, if that's not a rort, then I don't know what is. And you have to ask yourself, why is it that the Labor Party, rather than bringing in this policy, don't bring in, and I've been very vocal about this before, and I know many of the Labor people do follow my Facebook page, and I've done many posts on this, that why don't you charge the universities so that an infrastructure levy, because it's not just housing that immigration puts stress on, it's also all the associated infrastructure services that come with it. And you know, I'll compare and contrast the Labor Party of today, which is really more like a Marxist Communist Party, versus the old traditional blue-collar party of Ben Chiefeley, that actually, after World War II, had the Snowy Hydro scheme. So he got the immigrants, and there's many immigrants from Europe, from Yugoslavia and places like that that came in, and they, if they didn't go to the snowy, down to the Snowy Mountains, they went up to North Queensland and they built things. They went and they worked and they built things. And the true path to productivity in this country and to prosperity is through work. Okay? It is, the words of our national anthem say, it is wealth for toil. It is not wealth for high immigration. It is not wealth for flipping, changing the price of money on the first Tuesday of every month. It is not wealth for gambling a $10 billion housing fund by a bunch of bureaucrats and fund managers who are already skimming $30 billion off superannuation every year. No, 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 no. It is true productivity comes from being on the tools, not pushing pens and shuffling papers. And this is just more of a movement by the Labor Party away from being on the tools. And we well remember in 1985 John Button's plan, where he decided that they'd have this great idea that they'd rationalise manufacturing. And of course, how did that turn out for us? Well, they rationalised manufacturing all right. They sent it all offshore. And of course, that was a great ploy by the Labor Party, because Victoria, which was once the jewel in the Liberal Party crown because it was the manufacturing state of Australia, is now the jewel in the Labor Party crown because it has now become the Marxist capital of Australia, with a rabid university sector and a rabid superannuation sector. And this is the real shame about this, is that if we are going to get people into housing and build the associated infrastructure with it, we have to get our young people not going to university, but we have to get them going to TAFE. We have to get them back on the tools. So, this levy on universities should actually go to a housing fund for infrastructure, but it should also go to funding students to go to TAFE. As a matter of fact, I think it's worthy that now, if anyone joins the Army, we know that if you want to become an officer, you go to Duntroon. Why not, if you join the Army, you go and do an apprenticeship? And a part of that, and we have a civil engineering corps in the Army that goes about building federal highways, goes about building baseload energy power stations and dams, because that is what we have to do in this country. This idea that you can change the price of money on the first Tuesday of every month, this qualitative easing insanity, has got to stop. Because the idea that you're going to just crack down on demand and basically use austerity, punish the hard-working Australians through higher interest rates on their mortgages and impose austerity is insane. We should be imposing or actually improving productivity. And the way we do that is through quantitative easing against the seven sovereign assets that I've talked about in the past: dams, power stations, road, rail, ports, airports and telecommunications. The accountants, and I know there's not many of you in here, it's very simple. You debit asset, credit equity. Credit equity. Because if anyone knows how to read a balance sheet, equity is title, debt is mortgage. And we need to stop this insanity, and I'm sick and tired of hearing politicians in this place talk about how we've always relied on foreign debt. That is a complete and utter insult to the working people in this country who get out of bed every day and put their nose to the grindstone. What foreign debt is doing is sending us broke. Why on earth do we swap our hard assets, our children's hard assets, in the form of dams and power stations for foreign paper? Why do we do that? It is that simple. It is a very slight sleight of hand where you switch title to a mortgage. You switch, and that is what our sovereignty defines us, by controlling our currency. And that was another thing in 1985 when Hawke Keating decided to open the world to the capital markets. And we'll let the foreign debt flood in. We'll let the foreign debt flood in. In 1985, the four major banks had $8 billion in foreign capital. By 2008, they had $800 billion in foreign capital, in foreign debt. And what was that money lent against? It was lent against housing. It sent the price of housing from 4 to 5 times earnings to 12 to 13 times earnings. And on top of that, 1990, John Dawkins came, the former federal education minister, decided to come up with this great idea that every child should go to university. And what did that do? That just meant before our children, that pushed back their working age from when they started, from 17 or 18 to 21 or 22. And it meant that before they even started work, they were broke and brainwashed. They were broke by this punitive HECS debt that is rising every year, and they were brainwashed from the garbage that they teach in universities today. And to top it all off, then Hawke Keating introduced superannuation, which means that our students, when they get out and start work, it's bad enough they've got to pay HECS off. It's bad enough they're now in these careers that produce nothing, push a pen, shuffle paper. Hey, let's get a job with a future fund and gamble $10 billion on a housing fund. Okay, they then have to pay superannuation on top of the HECS, on top of the income tax. So why would you bother? Why are we loading our children with all of this paper debt and leaving them with very useless skills like pushing a pan and shuffling paper and all that sort of stuff? We have to get back on the tools if we want to solve this problem. So I say to the Labor Party, don't move this bill. This bill is silly. You've got to change your mind. This is not the way forward. Gambling, and I'll say the same thing tomorrow morning if Senator Bragg's crypto bill comes up, this gambling paper assets in order to actually think you're generating something is completely absurd. It is completely absurd. Okay? What we need to do is to sort out our productivity, and that's an overused term. We've got a productivity crisis in this country. Well, I will nail it down to what it is. We have too many. We push our students into university. That delays their working life by 4 years, and that can be some of the most productive working life of their years of their working career because they're young, fit and strong. That's when we need them out on the tools because their bodies can handle it. Right? Then we've got these other massive industries that we're pushing people into, like the financial engineering industry. We've got more academics than we need because we're teaching more students than we need. Okay? We've got more people teaching in childcare. Why not get grandma and granddad looking after the child? That way we can extend their working life. They can enjoy the sunset on their working life with their grandchildren, rather than, and then we can get some of the 200,000 people working in childcare and shift that on to back into the family with grandma and granddad. We need to encourage that sort of productive capacity back into doing productive things. We need to get our manufacturing sector. And if we're very smart with our quantitative easing, we can build more dams, build more power stations, build more roads, rail and transport. And if we can lower the cost of energy, and if we can actually improve logistics and lower the cost of business, we will be able to encourage manufacturing back onshore. And we should actually bring back stamp duty on share trading. 40 to 50% of the stock market is traded by scalpers or high-frequency traders. And the money that we can raise from stamp duty should go into abolishing payroll tax. That is another way to improve our productivity. That is another way to make it more competitive for our businesses, and we can bring our businesses back onshore, along with and another policy that needs to be done, and I've encouraged all treasurers while I've been down here to lift the rate of withholding tax on profits that go offshore. So I say this future fund is just another part of the problem we have in this country, where we somehow think by gambling and shuffling paper it's going to actually create more. It will not. I say lower the immigration rate, get our own population working again in real industries, and so that we can build our way to prosperity.
Authorised G. Rennick, LNP Chermside.